think it will take investment in training, and it will require all of us to kind of be really honest with ourselves and look at our behaviour, but we can definitely change it. And social marketers say 2 generations for major change, and I think we've seen that in other areas like gay rights, for example. So, yes, we can do it, but we've got to invest in training these workforce.
Very interesting. Anton Blank, thank you very much for being with us. Ruth, interesting stuff.
Yeah, and look, Anton's a smart man out of that sector, so he knows more about it than me, but I am bull at a gate, but I think we need to call it what it is. I think unconscious bias is a nice term that just pushes it underground and gives people an excuse. And at the end of the day, they're self-reporting that they weren't racist or genderist or whatever their prejudice or bias was. If they were actually being honest, which calling it bias rather than unconscious might force them to do. I think that would be...
I'm with you too, Ruth. People who are security staff, absolutely 100%. I mean, people who are security staff, they're going out there looking for things, and they're looking for certain types of things. It's conscious bias. Okay. There's no question in my mind.
All right, yes, the people tend to be in agreement with you. I agree with Ruth. People know exactly what they are saying and doing. Anton says, well, that's maybe fair enough, but the science says otherwise. Interesting stuff, isn't it? But this is fascinating. Fake speed cameras, no less. Is this genius idea to stop people speeding? One's been operating, or not operating, on private property on the busy southern entrance to Inglewood. So you've got this fake speed camera. It's like a cardboard box with a hole in it. And apparently for a while, Gary, it worked. Is this vigilantism or is it fair cop?
Well, no, what I've tended to do, because I was aware this was happening, is that when I'm in the car, I actually sit in the passenger seat and have a cardboard version of me behind the steering wheel. I just steer from the side. So it's actually a fake me driving as well. So that way it cancels out. I can see why people do this stuff, but it's a little bit silly. I think when you're trying to deal with a serious issue, what you need to do is have the real speed cameras trying to stop people from speeding.
The police said, look, if it works, we thought we'd run the idea of fake speed cameras to traffic and criminal lawyer Steve Cullen. Hello, Steve.
Good afternoon. I like Gary's idea of putting a cardboard effigy of himself to drive the vehicle.
Is it actually legal?
Yes, it is legal, so long as it's on private property and it's not impeding the flow of traffic. And as the officer said, it might actually motivate people to slow down. You know, there's a woman in the UK who goes and stands down the side of the road with a hairdryer and imitates somebody with a radar gun just to try and make people slow down.
You're kidding.
I've seen it. It's amazing. That's a job for you, Gary.
I think that's very clever. I mean, I do admire the enterprise of these people, but I just think at the end of the day there's a more serious issue that needs to be addressed seriously. But there we go.
So before we go, so do you think if it's on private property, you can do it, Steve?
Yeah, why don't the police take this one and run with it and put 600 fake speed cameras around the place and 300 legitimate ones, put up signs saying you're in a speed camera area and it may or may not be operative. That would motivate people to slow down. Now, they ought to be a bit careful. I was talking to somebody earlier about this. You know, up in Nunguru, they got fed up with people speeding through their lovely little backwater community, and they petitioned till finally the police put up a radar trap. Well, you know who got caught? The locals. And you stop and think about this. They said the people who started speeding through it, well, the only ones who are going to speed past the fake camera are those who know it's fake, which by definition is the locals.
Okay, Steve, we've got to go. Traffic criminal lawyer, Ruth Money, Gary McCormick, it's been a delight.
Yeah, thank you. I've enjoyed it too.
I'll miss you, Gary.
We'll miss you, Gary. Getting back in the tweed jacket and go vote somewhere. See you tomorrow.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, the seatbelt that opened up a can of worms on warranted fitnesses. You will see that seatbelt for the first time tonight. The sister of the man who died following the crash in an unsafe but warranted car accepts the NZTA's apology for its role in the saga that cost her brother's life, but she also says the agency didn't do its job. The aftermath of the flooding down south, Tapanui residents are being urged to conserve water amid fears the West Otago town could run out altogether. And the former National MP Jamie Lee Ross makes his first public appearance since being admitted to a mental health unit.
Radio New Zealand News at 5. No mai, haere mai. Good afternoon, I'm Paul Brennan. A vehicle industry leader says trying to warn the government and officials the road safety system is not up to scratch has been like hitting a brick wall. The Transport Agency has apologised for failing to enforce safety rules in many inspection areas, including warrants of fitness for cars. The Motor Industry Association's Chief Executive, David Crawford, says his organisation has been hearing alarming stories about inspection deficiencies for years. He says the number of technical experts at the agency has also been cut back amid multiple rounds of restructuring.
It's been very difficult to get attention previously at a senior management and board level, but I gather that that has all changed. The question is, why did we wait so long for it to change?
David Crawford says the Transport Agency's head, Fergus Gammy, has not prioritised safety until now. The Mayor of South Taranaki has admitted he's stuffed up by supporting a parade float that featured adults and children in blackface. The Lions Club float for an AMP parade through Hawera last Friday sparked outrage in the town and beyond. The Human Rights Commission has reiterated its view that blackface perpetuates the stereotypes underpinning racism. It's since emerged that the Mayor, Ross Dunlop, was on a judging panel that awarded second prize to the float.
You know, it was a fairly casual sort of event, just 4 floats, good community people. Yes, and I totally admit that I, stuffed up and got it wrong.
Ross Dunlop says he will not be offering his resignation. A woman has been rushed to hospital in a critical condition after a possible stabbing in central Auckland. The police were called to Anzac Avenue just before 3 this afternoon. Our reporter Katie Scotcher is at the scene.
There's a big police presence at the corner of Anzac Avenue and Short Street. The entrance of a Wilson car park building has been cordoned off and 4 police officers are on guard. The contents of a bag can be seen inside the cordon, strewn across the pavement. The woman was taken to Auckland Hospital, but the police have not yet confirmed the nature of her injuries. A man is helping them with their inquiries. Ko Katie Scotcher, aho.
In what could be a world first, Vanuatu is considering suing fossil fuel companies. Its Foreign Minister, Ralph Regenvanu, has told an online summit of Climate Vulnerable Forum that it's exploring the idea of legal action. Many of Vanuatu's islands are less than a metre above sea level. Mr Regenvanu says climate change and those who create it cannot go unchallenged.
There is a strong justification to tax the fossil fuel industry, producers of coal, oil and gas, to pay for that climate change, loss and damage that their industry is causing.
Ralph Regenvanu there. Individuals from Peru, the Philippines and several American cities and states are also seeking to hold oil, gas and coal companies accountable over climate change, but Vanuatu could be the first nation-state to do so. A Queensland woman accused of inserting needles into strawberries has been granted bail. The 50-year-old was charged this month with 7 counts of contamination of goods with intent to cause economic loss after the police identified her DNA on a needle found in a strawberry punnet in Victoria. She worked at the Berry-licious farm north of Brisbane, and prosecutors allege she was seeking revenge for a workplace grievance. More than 100 incidents of needles in berries were reported around Australia in September. Kiwibank and New Zealand Post are moving to stop sharing premises around the country. The bank, which has come under fire over its plan to close 2 branches in Wellington and 1 in Nelson, announced today it will open 13 new standalone branches without post offices. A Kiwibank spokesperson, Jeff Wallace, says the 2 companies have diverging needs.
Where customers want to have deep conversations and have a moment of truth in their life, something like buying a house, our customer feedback is that they want a place where they can come in and they can sit down. They're not in an environment that's heavily transactional and busy and a thoroughfare. New Zealand Post has slightly different requirements.
Jeff Wallace says there's no time frame for separating the premises. The West Otago town of Tapanui, population 744, could be about to run out of water. Heavy rain over the past 2 nights has turned the creek that feeds the town's reservoir to mud, meaning there's not enough clean water available. The pinch point will come in the next 2 hours as people return home and use more water, potentially draining the town's supply completely. The Clutha District Mayor, Brian Cadogan, says filters are being used to clean muddy creek water, but they're clogging up so quickly that only a small amount of water is getting through to the reservoir. He's urging the townspeople to conserve water. It's 5 minutes past 5. On to sport now. The All Blacks have made 11 changes to the starting 15 for their final test of the year against Italy in Rome. Loose forwards Adi Savia and Kieran Reid and backs Bowden Barrett and Damien McKenzie are the only survivors from the loss to Ireland in Dublin, as Joe Porter reports.
The entire front and second rows have changed, with hooker Dane Coles and prop Nepo Laulala getting some game time after injury-blighted seasons. Patrick Tuipolotu starts at lock, while Vaea Fafita is at blindside. Aaron and Ben Smith get a rest, with TJ Perenara at halfback and Geordie Barrett and Waisake Noholo on the wings, while Nani Laumapea and Anton Leonard-Brown have a chance to impress in the midfield. Richie Moonga misses out on a start. He'll once again provide cover from the bench as coach Steve Hansen continues his experiment with two playmakers in Bowden Barrett and Damien McKenzie at first five and fullback. Ko Joe Porter-Aho.
The New Zealand women's football team are unlikely to be troubled in getting past the Cook Islands tonight to advance to the semi-finals of the Oceania Nations Cup in Noumea. After an 11-0 win over Tonga in their opening match, a second win will guarantee a top four playoff spot. The winner of the tournament will qualify for next year's World Cup in France. And the Breakers coach, Kevin Braswell, has been fined $500 for criticising the officiating of referees against his side in the ANBL basketball competition after last week's game against Melbourne United. Braswell hit out about his team losing the foul count in all of their opening 8 games of the season. That's the news.
The cost of fixing hospitals.
These are eye-watering amounts. There's no getting around that. There is a significant amount of money that needs to be spent on infrastructure.
A funding crisis for Auckland's Pride Parade.
Where is the money going to come from? This thing costs. The whole thing is on the edge of collapsing.
And a major bid on an auction site.
I think it's a pretty good price going on. All the easy money is now off the table in terms of Trade Me's growth prospects.
Count on us to make sense of the news. Morning Report with Guy Espiner and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, claims the Department of Conservation is allowing tourism operators to flout the law and fly tourists into a remote part of Fiordland. And after 10, Roger Young and Potty Wagstaff on doing business in Wellington's Cuba Street for nearly 2 decades. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
We're funded through New Zealand On Air. Here's the short forecast now from our Met Service, taking us to midnight Friday. That's tomorrow. Northland, fine spells, isolated showers for the rest of today, Thursday. Scattered rain tomorrow, possibly heavy from evening. Auckland to Manawatu, including Coromandel Bay of plenty in the central high country. Showers today, some heavy, possibly thundery about the ranges. Fine apart from early fog tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, showers today. Thunderstorms possible, especially about the ranges. Fine spells and isolated showers tomorrow. Hortowhenua to Wellington and Wairarapa, rain, possible thunderstorms, especially about the ranges, easing this evening, becoming mainly fine tomorrow, but cloud remaining in Wairarapa. Marlborough, occasional showers. Canterbury, patchy drizzle this evening and in the morning. Afternoon, fine spells with isolated inland showers. Nelson, Buller, Westland and Fiordland, also Otago and Southland becoming fine about now. However, isolated afternoon and evening showers about the ranges today and tomorrow, and at the Chatham Islands, fine today, cloudy tomorrow with the chance of evening rain. 8 minutes past 5.
And you're listening to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Coming up, the Midwife strike, the aftermath of the flooding down south, outrage over Kiwibank closures in Wellington, and Jamie Lee Ross makes his first appearance after his release from mental health care. But for the first time tonight, Checkpoint will show you the seatbelt that failed in a car crash that turned fatal. It is at the heart of an ongoing investigation into the issuing of warrant of fitnesses. The photo was given to the Dargaville garage owner that issued the allegedly dodgy warrant and shows a busted plastic clip that appears to be where the shoulder strap meets the lap belt on the seatbelt, the bit that sits down at the passenger's hip and clips into the other component of the seatbelt. NZTA has described the belt as frayed. We will have more on that later. But first we start in Northland, where almost 2,000 motorists are being urged to have their warrant of fitnesses rechecked after Dargaville Diesel Specialists had its licence revoked following the fatal crash. The garage issued a warrant of fitness to a car that was later involved in a crash. NZTA says the seatbelt failed and William Ball, a passenger in that car, later died. William's sister, Brenda Elliott, says her brother never owned a car himself, shied away from fuss and probably would not have blamed the garage. But she says NZTA told her it didn't have enough evidence to shut the offending garage down any earlier. Brenda Elliott told me that she accepted NZTA's apology for its part in her brother's death, but she feels the agency was negligent.
My bill would be absolutely horrified that we've come to this that's happening today. he would be appalled, because he was a very shy, humble person who would dive under a rock before he would face up to a crowd that's out there at the moment.
What about what's gone on here with the problems with the garage and the problems with the New Zealand transport? What do you make of all of that?
Well, it's negligence, isn't it, on behalf of the people issuing the warrants, and also on behalf of New Zealand Transport for allowing this to go on.
And how do you feel about that? Because it's ended with you losing your little brother.
It's taken the life of my brother, yes, and I'm powerless to change anything. We can just feel heartbroken. Heartbroken for the simple fact that it has happened, and there's no way I can change that. I would if I could.
I understand, Brenda, that the NZTA, someone from the NZTA came to see you.
They did, yes.
Who was that?
Fergus.
And what did he say to you?
He apologised and said they were very sorry that they had been looking at stopping these people from carrying on illegally, and they've been powerless up until this time to stop them.
Did he explain why they'd been powerless?
Well, they had to have proof, did they not?
And he was
them being negligent.
And did he say to you that they didn't have the proof they needed at the time?
That's right.
Because they've said publicly that they knew there were problems with the garage since 2011. Did he explain that?
Well, I mean, that was a fact. There were problems out of that place in that time. And I suppose that they were negligent in that they didn't follow it up and were able to do something to stop them operating.
Brenda, have you accepted his apology?
I accepted his apology. There's not a lot I can do to change the facts. I'm sure now that this has come to light and been made such a production of, that nobody in their right minds would dare to sign a certificate unless it was carried out to the letter.
You're local, Brenda. Do you know Rodney Wilson? Do you use that?
Not personally.
Right.
No.
So your car.
And I don't doubt that because of everything that's happened, he probably feels a bit crucified. Bloody hard to be in business in this country in a small town like Dargaville. And yes, I do feel sympathy for Rodney, and sorry that he's going through this.
Do you feel that he's paid for any mistakes he's made? He's lost that?
I think that he's paid, and he'll probably go on paying.
There are, as we understand it, about 1,900 vehicles that still need to be checked. I
don't believe that.
Right.
Because a warrant of fitness is for a 6-month period unless you have a late model car. And it's only the old cars that were having difficulty getting passed through through businesses that were running correctly. People that couldn't afford to go to the garage where they had to pay big money would go to the cheaper option. They were too old and they weren't roadworthy. They weren't roadworthy to get a warrant of fitness. So
they went to this Dargaville garage.
They went to Rodney. Word gets around, and Rodney perhaps signed the certificates without looking. He may have glanced at them, but he didn't check them out. And I'm sorry, but Rodney's going to have to pay the price for negligence, isn't he? He is paying the price now.
So those ones that still might be outstanding, still might need their cars checked again.
I don't believe there's 1,900 of them.
No. So, but however many there are, Brenda, having lost your brother as a consequence of these events, what would you say to those drivers? You know,
of course they need to get their warrant of fitness checked if there's anybody out there. And if their car is not roadworthy, take it off the road. What's it doing on the road? It's not worth the hassle. Takes 2 seconds to die, doesn't it?
I feel that we should talk about your brother, because this is about him. What would you like us to know about William?
A very simple person, a terrific artist, absolutely brilliant artist. Humble. Had a lot of friends that I never knew he had, and yet I saw him most days. friends. He had friends that it was unbelievable. Yeah.
You were the big sister, Brenda?
I'm the big sister, yes. He was my baby brother.
And you saw him almost every day?
I did.
Gosh, it must be a terrible loss for you.
It was a big loss, yeah. Those people who've not got a current warrant of fitness, go get it. Go get it. You can, if you can afford a car and to put petrol in, then you can afford to go and get a warrant of fitness. And if you've not got a legitimate warrant of fitness, you need to fix that immediately, like today.
Brenda Elliott there, who is the sister of William Ball, who died in that crash where the seatbelt apparently failed. The Fergus that she's referring to in that interview is Fergus Gammy, the chief executive of NZTA. Now, we did invite NZTA onto the program. We wanted to clarify whether NZTA had enough information to shut down Dargaville Diesel a lot earlier than they did. And we also wanted to clarify some of the points that were raised there by Brenda Elliott. But NZTA said their conversation with Mr. Ball's family was private, and it says that an independent review is underway into how it handled the whole Dargaville Diesel specialist saga. We'll have more on this story later in the show. Now to the rural community of Middlemarch, where some streets were transformed into sewage ponds by Tuesday's downpour. The town's 300 affected residents and business owners are now looking for answers as to how their area could be so badly affected. While the clean-up begins, it will be a long recovery for some, with the town's busiest season just around the corner. Our Otago Southland reporter, Timothy Brown, went there to talk to locals.
By about 6 o'clock that night, this whole place was flooded, and it was flooded up to knee-high in raw sewage. So there was nothing we could do. We waited until the next morning until it went down, and then realised that the damage was quite excessive. We basically have to rip out everything in this place. Even the wall linings had to be ripped out.
That's Tapendo Bistro owner Norma Emerson recounting the effects of Tuesday's deluge. The business only opened about a week ago and was gearing up for the busy summer season, until what can only be described as a fountain of crap spewed its grisly contents through the restaurant.
It's heartbreaking seeing them ripping off our wall linings and the counter, which we spent a lot of money on and we were quite proud of. I don't think there's going to be much standing inside the building. We're going to be left with an empty shell that we will have to refurbish.
Mrs. Emerson is already counting the cost of the damage as well as lost business that will eventuate from it being closed until at least Christmas and potentially even into late January. On Tuesday, the Dunedin City Council said systems around the city area were coping as well as could be expected considering the deluge. But Mrs. Emerson, who sits on the local community board, disagrees.
That was PR talk. That was rubbish. That might have been the case in other places, in other areas of Dunedin. It certainly was not the case here. And I know I followed all the little news releases and everything that's been put out, and I just looked at it and thought, what bullshit are they talking? Because honestly, what was happening here was disastrous.
And she's not alone in her assessment. Others are left wondering if the city-based council is concerned about the small outlying rural town, which marks the beginning of the Otago Central Rail Trail. One man who didn't want to be named says his yard was contaminated with sewage and he still hasn't heard from the council.
Not very good. You know, like stormwater we can handle, you know, like it's, yeah, but I mean the sewage, it should not have happened, you know, so they'll have to do something soon because if it happens again, you know, this is the second time that since we've been here that it's happened. So. The thing is that no one's been round to see us and explain what's going to happen or the procedures or how contaminated we are. You know, so.
It's the second time in 14 months sewage has poured into the property. His next door neighbour is in the same boat and says the stench of an unflushed toilet is starting to get to them.
Basically the biggest problem is the sewage is not working.
The sewage isn't working now?
It's still not working yet properly. We can't flush the toilet at this stage.
Down the road, Linda McKenzie had to pile dirt onto her driveway to keep stormwater at bay. She says it was a nerve-wracking time.
It was pouring down the street here. The drain over here was full to the top and it was pouring into the yard of the house across there. But yeah, primarily it's garden that's been affected for us, so not as bad as some people.
Strathtyre School closed its doors on Tuesday and opened late yesterday. But today pupils at the school, wearing their gumboots of course, are full of their own stories of the flood.
What was Mum having to do in the tractor?
She had to go and shift some sheep in the tractor. One cow was stuck on the other
side of the creek and the calf was stuck on the right side, and the calf tried to get across to its mother.
We had a flood that hit the dirt and it sort of like came down like that.
We could get through though. We found a little gap and we went through there.
Oh, good.
And we didn't crash.
The state highway is still closed at Hyde, just out of the town, and while the waters have receded, the clean-up will take some time. In Middlemarch, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
That report from Tim Brown, and he did approach the Dunedin City Council for a response, but they are yet to get back to him. Hospital midwives have started the first of nationwide rolling stoppages, taking to the streets in Waikato to demand better recognition for their vital role. A rally in Hamilton marked the start of the strike action by 1,100 midwives in the Maris Union. Our health correspondent Karen Brown reports.
What do we want? Fair pay! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Fair pay! When do we want it? Now!
Hospital midwives who could be released from their duties at Waikato Hospital today were on the street protesting. Courtney Butler, in her 7th year as a midwife, says they want their own pay scale, separate to nurses, in recognition of the job and its responsibilities.
Women can walk into Waikato Hospital in labour, have their baby, do all their postnatal cares by a midwife without a doctor being present if they're normal. And we just want recognition that we have those abilities to do that.
She says it's not about nurses, but midwifery and separate recognition.
We still get called nurse, which is not an insult to us. We absolutely appreciate all our nursing colleagues, but we just want to finally be recognised for the autonomous profession that we are.
Several hundred midwives who are part of the Nurses Union accepted a pay deal with district health boards in August. Maris, representing the bulk of hospital midwives, says that's good, but its members deserve separate consideration. Also on the picket line today, another midwife, Jessica Jordan, says she loves the job, but it's demanding.
It's a really exhausting job emotionally, physically, mentally, and although it is very satisfying, often we know the most satisfying things in life come with a toll, and this job is not remunerated for fairly for the amount of work and the physical, personal, mental, emotional sacrifice that we put in.
Karen Barnes, with over 30 years as a midwife under her belt, says community and hospital midwives have been struggling for recognition for years.
We're just sick of not being recognised and valued for our role as midwives. We're continuously lumped alongside nurses, and it's time to stand up and recognise us as a separate profession.
She says the job is crucial, which was evident in the few midwives able to be released for strike action today under life-preserving services arrangements with the Waikato DHB.
Women and families and babies of this country cannot be birthed and looked after by anybody else. We are absolutely vital. For as long as babies have been being born, there has been a midwife.
The DHB spokesperson Jim Green says the midwives are turning down an excellent offer of 9% more over 18 months, plus 2 pay step increases and a lump sum. He says the Maris midwives should accept the offer, leaving wider issues for consideration under the upcoming pay equity process.
We've already had discussions about a process for that. Midwives will lead that, and there's an agreement. The effective date for that will be the 31st of December 2019. So we think that addresses some of those other issues that the midwives are raising as well.
Mr Green's also urging the midwives to join facilitation or return to mediation to find a way through the impasse. Maris, meanwhile, says strike action will continue daily until December 5 at all or some public hospitals. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Karen Brown tēnei.
Earlier in the program, the sister of a man killed in a car which passed a warrant just a few weeks before a crash where his seatbelt failed, warned Northland motorists to get their warrants rechecked. So are locals heeding Brenda Elliott's warning? Our reporter Nita Blake-Person and our cameraman Nick Munro went to Dargaville to find out.
The sign at the entrance to Dargaville welcomes motorists to the small Northland town, the gateway to the Cody Coast. The population is less than 5,000 and now almost 2,000 people here have got their warrants of fitness from Dargaville Diesel Specialists, owned for the past 11 years by Rodney Wilson. The whole process of issuing warrants is under scrutiny after Mr Wilson himself gave a warrant of fitness last December to a 1991 Nissan Sentra, which was involved in a car accident just a few weeks later. 65-year-old William Ball was a passenger in that car which lost control and crashed into a ditch on State Highway 12. His head is understood to have struck the windscreen, the result of what NZTA described as a faulty frayed seatbelt. He died 26 days later in hospital from a bacterial infection. At his workshop today, Mr Wilson disputed that. He showed Checkpoint for the first time photographs of the seatbelt in question and told us the plastic clip on the belt had broken and the metal had severed the belt.
The plastic is broken and the plastic protects the belt from being cut on the metal buckle, and what's happened is that plastic piece has been broken and the belt's cut on the buckle.
Mr Wilson said if the belt had been in that condition at the time of the inspection, it would never have been given a warrant. Yesterday, the Transport Agency admitted knowing for years Dargaville Diesel Specialist was not doing proper checks, but it took years before it took action and only recently revoked Mr Wilson's licence to give warrants. Now the owners of nearly 2,000 vehicles given warrants by the Dargaville garage are being urged to get them rechecked. But today, most people weren't concerned.
The Land Transport Agency sent out coupons for us to go and get our warrants rechecked. But no, not really. I mean, I'll drive a Holden, it's pretty safe, but yeah.
Have you taken it anywhere else since the licence?
No, because it's still current.
I got a letter saying that I can get a voucher, to check at another warrant place to go to, yeah.
Have you done that yet?
No.
Are you worried about your car at all?
No, not really, no.
Have you been going there for quite a while?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
And they've always passed it, no problems?
Yeah, it took a while, I sat, they didn't just drive out in it, I sat for a while and then, yeah, they brought my car back to me.
This local was one of those who received a letter and has had her vehicle rechecked.
Yeah, I have, and it cleared.
These locals said they had sympathy for Mr Wilson.
Because he is a really nice guy. I think if anything, he was just trying to help people out, you know what I mean?
I have been using them for the last decade or so.
How are you feeling now?
I'm very sad for Rodney. He's a nice guy, he meant well. Helped a lot of people. There's a lot of pedantic, bloody guest VTNZ types out there. I've had bad experiences with a number of them. So yeah, it's what it is.
Are you worried about your car now?
No, I've just had a warrant put on it.
NZTA says it has visited Mr Wilson's garage 15 times and it has had compliance issues since 2011. But Mr Wilson says a review last year by an NZTA inspector didn't raise any flags.
In June 2017 we had a review and we came out 100% good.
He admitted he had let one staff member go, but mostly for personal and health reasons rather than his vehicle inspections, and he says there were things the inspector told him could be improved.
Well, they told us that we needed more time to do a warrant of fitness. That was one of the things, that the time allowed to do a warrant of fitness was unreasonable. We allowed half an hour, and in that half an hour, only 20 minutes about was for the inspection, maybe a little more, but you had the full half an hour because the office lady would get the particulars off the vehicle and load and issue the warrant of fitness at the end of the inspection. So they told us that was unreasonable. Now the AA say 25 minutes, reading the paperwork.
Mr Wilson says while he doesn't accept full responsibility for Mr Ball's death, he is sorry.
I actually know them all. And yeah, I feel quite sad for them, for their loss, but at the same time I feel sad for me being accused of something that wasn't the cause of his death. So, I mean, what do you do?
He said he knew Mr Ball was a local and he knew his family.
If my part had anything to do with his death, yes, I'm sorry. But if it didn't, well, I'm still sorry. I'm still sad for their loss, but yeah.
The Transport Agency refused to be interviewed on Checkpoint and hasn't specified just what measures it's taken since it was alerted by the Dargaville case to gauge how many garages aren't making the grade they should be on warrant of fitnesses. For Checkpoint, Nita Blakeperson.
And you can hear more from the Dargaville Diesel Specialist owner Rodney Wilson after 6 tonight. Coming up, Kiwibank customers in Wellington are outraged that their local branches are being shut. And former National MP Jamie Lee Ross makes his first public appearance since his release from mental health care. We'd love your feedback. Don't forget you can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or reach us on Facebook, Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. But first, here's Paul Brennan with the headlines.
Thank you, Lisa. The Motor Industry Association head says his organisation has tried without success to warn the government and officials about failings in the road safety system. The Transport Agency has apologised for failing to enforce safety rules in many areas, including warrants of fitness inspections for cars. David Crawford says his organisation has been hearing alarming stories about flawed inspections for years, but the Transport Agency has been very slow to respond till now. A 62-year-old woman has admitted careless driving causing the death of Dargaville man William Ball. Mr. Ball, who is 65, was in a car that crashed in a ditch near the Northland town in January. The police found his seatbelt failed on impact, although the car had been given a warrant of fitness weeks before by Dargaville diesel specialists. A woman has been rushed to hospital in a critical condition after a possible stabbing in central Auckland this afternoon. The police have cordoned off the entrance to a Wilson car park building, and 4 officers are on guard at the corner of Anzac Avenue and Short Street. Kiwibank and New Zealand Post are taking steps to stop sharing premises due to what a spokesperson describes as diverging needs. The bank is under fire over its plan to close 2 branches in Wellington and 1 in Nelson, but it announced today it will open 13 new standalone branches without post offices. The South Taranaki Mayor won't resign over awarding a prize to a parade float featuring adults and children in blackface in Hawera last Friday. The Human Rights Commission has reiterated that blackface perpetuates stereotypes which underpin racism. Ross Dunlop says he was asked to be a judge at short notice and wasn't paying much attention. Māori Television's long-running news program Te Kaia will end in February when the network's 4 current affairs programs are reduced to 1. The Deputy Chief Executive Shane Taurima says they will still broadcast an evening news show and the changes will enable more reporters to work in the field. And that's the news.
And you're listening to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen, and Nona Peltier joins us in the studio to talk business. Net migration figures, annual net migration figures. What's been going on with those?
Well, look, the numbers have shown a switch. We're seeing fewer people arriving and more people leaving. So we've got a situation where our numbers are down and expected to continue, which is an interesting position because we've been talking about immigration being an issue. Government said, look, we've had too much immigration, and now we're seeing a shift which is causing some concern to economists, for example, because they're concerned that it may mean that we're going to have more shortages in key labour market areas.
Do we have any more detail on who's leaving, whether it's Kiwis going offshore or what?
It is New Zealanders leaving, yeah. It says here that there was more New Zealanders leaving than before, and so we had a net, basically more, about 3,400 more New Zealanders leaving than returning. These are citizens, as opposed to just general migration. And so overall, our total net migration was 61,800. And so we had people arriving. We had migration of 64,900. That was the number coming in. But 3,100 more New Zealanders were leaving than arriving.
Where are they going? Do we know that?
I don't actually know exactly where they're going. They could be going to Australia. We were just speculating about why are people leaving, and there's probably a lot of reasons. Opportunity, the housing market. I mean, it's difficult for people wanting to get a good start here in New Zealand, whereas other, say Australia, for example, you potentially could buy a house cheaper if you wanted to live in a big city there. Who knows? I mean, it's hard to tell. And what's going to happen now is we no longer have departure cards. So from November 5th, just earlier this month, we don't fill those cards in anymore. That's going to change the way the numbers stack up. We've also seen these most recent numbers, a drop in the number of student visa applications. So in many ways, the changes are going to change, I guess, the economy in some way. We've got fewer students coming, fewer migrants coming, and more New Zealanders leaving.
And lower unemployment.
Yeah, and the unemployment at very low levels, below 4%. So we've already starting to see the labour market as one of the key issues. When you ask about business sentiment, they're saying, look, we're having a really hard time finding the people we need to do our jobs. And now I think you might see there even more pressure coming on the government to relax immigration rather than tighten it. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So it will be an interesting thing. We don't know whether this is a trend or just a blip. It's too soon to say.
What about the markets today? What's been going on?
Okay, so we ended up 1/3% on the markets. That's we've had some down days, as you know. So we ended up at 8,703. That's a rise of 31 points. The dollar was down slightly, just a little bit, 68.1 US cents, 93.9 Australian, and 53.3 pence. And that's really because of volatility in the US dollar. People aren't sure which way is up there with the US economy. Some people are thinking maybe it could be slowing down. There's concern about global economic growth too.
All right, thanks Nona, appreciate it. Kiwibank customers, they are outraged at news their local branches are being shut. The state-owned banks yesterday announced its Johnsonville, Petone and Stoke branches will close. Today it also announced 13 new standalone bank branches which won't be associated with a post shop. Alex Ashton spoke to Johnsonville locals who are dubbing the closures crazy.
I'm here on the main road of Johnsonville, standing outside the Kiwibank. As you can probably hear, there's a lot of traffic on the road. It's the main strip through Johnsonville. And looking inside, there's quite a few people lining up to do their banking or possibly use the post office. I'm just going to try and talk to some people as they come out and see what they think of the fact that the bank is set to close.
I'm appalled. I thought that Johnsonville was a progressive and vibrant little community.
Sylvia's just finished up some banking at the Johnsonville Kiwibank. She wasn't happy to hear that soon she won't be able to.
And if they close that down, I might be tempted to go down to one of the other banks here, and I don't want to because I like dealing with the Kiwibank.
Other locals agreed, like David.
Well, I don't think that's a very good move at all. There's a lot of elderly people in the area. The area's on a growth path. Here we are, the main street of Johnsonville. The other major banks are represented and they're taking Kiwibank away.
And these residents who can't use online banking.
Bit of an annoyance, to be honest. I can do some of the phone banking, I guess. But no, I'd rather sort of be done here sometimes.
You know, I'd run out of fingers and toes if I named the number of people that I know that don't have access to computers and aren't interested in using them.
The need to come down and transact and get help as you get a little older is very important. So the risks are, what do they do?
Kiwibank says its Petone, Johnsonville and Stoke branches are all within 10 kilometres of another Kiwibank, and it won't close them until the attached post shops lock in new premises. On the back of the closures, Kiwibank today announced 13 new standalone branches throughout the country. Its General Manager Retail Distribution, Jeff Waller, says this is what customers want.
We have to balance our desire to be in every community with the realities of rapidly falling over-the-counter transaction numbers as more and more customers are choosing to interact with us through online channels. And we know that isn't all customers, but we have to find a way to balance things out and have a presence in communities in a financial, sustainable way.
The announcement of the closures has become political too. Nelson's MP Nick Smith, Hutt South's Chris Bishop and Ohariu's Greg O'Connor have all got into bat for their patches. Speaking to me outside the Johnsonville branch, Mr O'Connor says the closure's crazy because Johnsonville's booming and the shop is always busy.
Those who want to stop their money, their profits heading off overseas, those billions that we've seen repatriated this year with the big Aussie banks, your BNZs, your ANZs, that's serious money leaving this country. Why would you pull out of the fastest growing area in Wellington at a time when people are starting to look at their banking requirements?
He's also flagged his concerns with the finance and state-owned enterprise ministers. Public meetings against the closures are planned in Johnsonville and Nelson. The invitations extend to Kiwibank too, but judging by the locals' outrage, it could be a frosty reception. For Checkpoint, call Alex Ashton, TNA.
The former National MP Jamie Lee Ross has made his first public appearance since his release from mental health care. Mr Ross attended the opening of Middlemarch's new Te Aho Mai mental health unit this afternoon, where he was admitted last month. Annika Smith was there.
After spending a month underground, Jamie Lee Ross resurfaced for the first time this afternoon. But Mr Ross wasn't playing politics. Instead, his attendance was to show thanks to the staff of Te Aho Mai.
I'm just here to support the staff and the doctors and nurses at Te Aho Mai. They do a fantastic job and there's amazing people and this is their special day at the opening of the new building, so I just wanted to be here to support them. I'm not here to talk politics. I'm here as a local MP but also as someone that is very thankful for everything they did for me but also for thousands of New Zealanders.
Mr Ross mingled with guests this afternoon, appearing relatively unaffected by the posse of cameras focused on him. The Botany MP was expelled from the National Party caucus last month after an investigation concluded he was most likely responsible for leaking details of Simon Bridges' expenses. He then unleashed a series of allegations against the National Party leadership before being admitted to Middlemarch Hospital's mental health unit for several days. Before cutting the ribbon to Te Aho Mai, the Health Minister David Clark thanked Mr Ross for coming.
I was delighted that there were several members of Parliament here, including Jamie Lee today. I think that it's symbolic and appropriate and courageous on his part that he was here to be a part of this opening today.
The Te Aho Mai unit is phase 1 of the new adult mental health inpatient facility at Middlemarch Hospital. The new 38-bed facility features designs that reflect tangata whenua, with open courtyards and a whare out front. Mr Ross won't be returning to Parliament next week when the House resumes sitting, as he still has leave granted by the Speaker. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Annika Smith aho.
The public may know before Christmas whether classified information on a controversial Defence Force raid in Afghanistan will be released. An inquiry is examining allegations New Zealand soldiers killed Afghan civilians during Operation Burnham in 2010, then covered it up. The claims were made by Nikki Hager and John Stevenson in the book Hit and Run. Former Supreme Court Judge Sir Terence Arnold and former Prime Minister Sir Geoffrey Palmer have been holding a preliminary hearing on whether sensitive information should be made public and whether some witnesses can remain anonymous. The hearing ended today and Anne-Marie May was at the court.
The Defence Force lawyer Paul Radich QC said anonymity was an essential part of SAS members being able to carry out their duties, and their procedures and tactics were immensely different to conventional armed services members. When asked by Sir Terence how that fitted with the case of Willie Apiata, who was publicly identified when he was awarded the Victoria Cross, Mr Radich said he understood that adversely affected Mr Apiata's operational capabilities. He said there were only a small number of SAS members, and apart from operational matters, the Defence Force is also concerned that if they are identified while giving evidence at the inquiry, they could be at risk in other ways.
Targets for exploitation, if they're known, their personal safety and wellness, the personal safety and wellness of members of their families. The way in which social media operates can quickly cause significant harm to family members, and so it's for these types of reasons that NZDF is very focused on ensuring anonymity at all times.
Another Crown lawyer, Aaron Martin, told the hearing the inquiry's findings could trigger a criminal or civil proceeding, but the inquiry itself was not that kind of process. He said an investigation carried out after Operation Burnham by international forces and the Afghan government found no breach of international humanitarian law. Mr Martin said after the Hit and Run book was published, raising allegations of civilian deaths, the Defence Force sought extra information from its international partners, which upheld those earlier findings.
There is a role for this inquiry which includes assessing the credibility of serious allegations, but there is not at present any basis for reasonable suspicion or that there's a credible allegation of war crimes by New Zealand forces.
A lawyer acting for the previous National Defence Minister Wayne Mapp said his client believed material put before the inquiry should to the greatest extent possible be made public. That was echoed by Alan Ringwood, a lawyer acting for several media outlets who wished to cover the inquiry, who said the relevant legislation directed those in charge of inquiries to be guided by open justice. He said open justice also allowed the public to have confidence in the inquiry process.
If we're having an inquiry into something in respect of which it's said that the public is losing confidence in the Defence Force, perhaps it's affecting their reputation, then it's even more important that there should be public confidence in the inquiry. And that is what open justice can deliver.
It was revealed during the hearing that the number of documents the Defence Force had which might be relevant to the inquiry had grown from about 2,000 to more than 17,000. So far, only a little over 300 of those documents have actually been made available to the inquiry. In Wellington for Checkpoint, Anne-Marie May.
A 14-year-old boy accused of stabbing a homeless man to death in Hawke's Bay says he has no idea how blood got onto the knife he was holding after the attack. Giving evidence in the High Court in Napier as the defence case's one and only witness, Hami Hanara repeatedly denied killing 40-year-old Kelly Donna. Anusha Bradley was at the trial and filed this report.
Kelly Donna was found in a pool of blood outside a Flaxmere pub. A major artery was severed in his neck and he bled to death within minutes. The Crown says Hami Hanara stabbed Kelly Donna 14 times during a fight over a torch he'd borrowed from him. Opening the defence's case, his lawyer Eric Forster said the teenager did have a knife, but he did not deliberately kill Mr Donna.
Just because Kelly Donna died does not mean that anyone intended for him to die.
As the defence's only witness, Hami Hanara told the court he was given the knife to hold by a friend, while he and Mr Donna fought one-on-one. He told his lawyer, Mr Forster, that he had earlier tried to warn Mr Donna to leave when the argument over the torch became heated and Mr Donna became aggressive.
What were you worried about?
That everyone was going to beat him up.
Did you say anything?
Yes.
What did you say?
I told him to go. It would end bad.
Because it would what?
End bad.
What did you mean by that?
Because everyone was starting to get angry.
The fight escalated and moved to a grassy area outside the Flax Bar and Eatery. That was when the accused said he was handed a knife to look after, while his friend continued to fight one-on-one with Mr Donna. CCTV footage presented to the jury shows Hami Hanara holding a knife moments before he and 4 other friends all piled on Mr Donna, and then him holding a bloodied knife shortly after the attack. There is no footage of the actual attack. Under cross-examination, the teenager told Crown Prosecutor Steve Manning he did not know how the knife became bloodied, and he repeatedly denied stabbing Mr Donna.
You had the knife. Nobody else had a knife, did they?
No.
So do you think it seems pretty likely, Hami, that it's you that's used the knife to stab Kelly?
No.
Hami, you know you stabbed Kelly, don't you?
No.
Just don't want to face up to it?
No.
Hami Hanara also denied he told a witness that he had stabbed Mr Donna and that they should run. Earlier today, the court heard he was arrested more than 270 kilometres away from the crime scene on a rural property in Whanganui on April the 6th, just over a month after the attack. The prosecution and defence are expected to give their closing addresses tomorrow. In Napier for Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
The Mayor of South Taranaki, Ross Dunlop, says he has no plans to resign after it was revealed he was on a judging panel that awarded second prize to a float in an AMP parade featuring people in blackface. The Lions Club float, featuring adults and children in blackface last Friday, sparked outrage in Hawera and beyond. Our Taranaki Wanganui reporter, Robin Martin, spoke to Ross Dunlop this afternoon.
I do actually have to admit that I wasn't actually paying that much attention. I just saw the Hawera Lions, and I just know all the good work they do, and I thought that they should be acknowledged.
So Ross, it's got to be asked, in this situation, did you not notice that they were wearing blackface? They were wearing black fuzzy wigs and blacked out faces. And
I certainly acknowledge that I got that wrong, and it was a black and white theme, and I could hear Michael Jackson singing Black and White, and that's actually a song about bringing races together.
So I guess that begs the question then, are you aware of the blackface phenomenon and the feelings that evokes in some people?
Yeah, no, definitely am, and as soon as I realised that.
So how did you not notice it on Friday?
I think given the context of what I've just told you, it was a fairly casual sort of event.
Now, the other thing, Ross, is that this story has been playing out all week. You were approached for comment early in the week, and you made no mention of being one of the judges who had selected them for second prize. Why is it taking you so long?
I did have that question raised with me on Tuesday. I did reply to the person, one of the reporters, and unfortunately it's taken till Thursday for them to reply to me. So, really, there was certainly no reason why it couldn't have been known earlier. No problem with that at all.
So you're saying that you would have been available and you would have told someone if they'd ever got a hold of...
Yeah, exactly, yeah. No, why would I? I mean, it's pretty obvious. I mean, there were actually hundreds of people around the judging area, so there was,
Now you've said you've said that you're sorry. You've said that you've got it wrong. That there are other people calling for your resignation.
Yep.
Have you given that any thought?
No, I haven't, and I certainly don't intend to resign. I just absolutely know that I am not a racist. I've got zero tolerance for it, and I'm happy to stand up there anywhere publicly and shout that from the rooftop. It is just not me, and I got it wrong. Totally understand that, understand how some people are concerned. But I'm more looking forward, how can we actually make this better for the future?
And that was Ross Dunlop talking to Robin Martin. Britain is warning there will be serious diplomatic consequences for the United Arab Emirates after a British academic was sentenced to life in jail for spying. 31-year-old Matthew Hedges, who's a PhD student, was found guilty after a hearing that lasted a meagre 5 minutes. He was arrested earlier this year after a 2-week research trip. He says he's innocent but was forced to sign a confession saying he was spying for the British government. The BBC's Paul Adams reports.
Today's ruling has stunned Mr Hedges, his family and the government. His wife, Daniela, who was in court, said she was in complete shock. The UAE, she said, should be ashamed of such an obvious injustice. Her husband, she insisted, was innocent. Speaking in the House of Commons, the Prime Minister said she was deeply disappointed by the verdict, a view echoed by the Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt.
We see absolutely no evidence for any of the charges laid against him. We're very concerned for his welfare. The UAE is supposed to be a friend and ally of Britain's. We've given them repeated assurances about Matthew. And if we can't resolve this, there are going to be serious diplomatic consequences.
The UAE's Attorney General, Dr Hamad Saif al-Shamsi, said Mr Hedges had confessed in detail to all his crimes and pleaded guilty in court. He said today's sentence was not final and that Mr Hedges had the right to appeal for a retrial, where the evidence against him would be reviewed and the court could hear again from him and his lawyer. But the academic's family says Matthew Hedges has been mistreated ever since his arrest on May the 5th. A spokeswoman said the confession was made during the first 6 weeks of questioning, when Mr Hedges was under extreme duress and being interrogated in the absence of a lawyer. And Hiba Zayedine from Human Rights Watch said she had zero confidence in the administration of justice in the UAE, especially in cases involving state security.
They are mistreated in detention, and we know that coerced confessions are always admitted into court proceedings. So this has been a deeply unfair trial and consequently a deeply unfair verdict.
Academic colleagues are equally appalled. The Vice-Chancellor of Durham University, Professor Stuart Corbridge, said Mr Hedges' detention, which included more than 5 months in solitary confinement, had breached his human rights. The judgment, he said, had been delivered in the absence of anything resembling due process or a fair trial. Cinzia Bianco, a PhD candidate at Exeter University and a friend of Matthew Hedges, said she thought the trial was politically motivated.
Well, it would definitely send a very clear message that there are very thin red lines, and they wouldn't tolerate anybody who is willing to cross them in seek of any kind of knowledge or analysis.
3 weeks ago, Matthew Hedges was released from jail and told to stay in the UAE until today's hearing. Hopes were raised that he was about to be released. Those hopes have now been dashed, and it's not at all clear what happens next.
Paul Adams in London. The famed documentary maker Sir David Attenborough has sounded a dire warning that the failure to tackle climate change will be catastrophic for the planet. The United Nations has asked him to take on a new role ahead of a crucial climate summit next month. Members of the public are being asked to submit their views that Sir David can then put to world leaders at the meeting. The BBC's Victoria Gill filed this report.
The monsoons are sometimes coming too early or too late, like nothing is on time.
It's either too hot or too cold, and we can't grow anything.
We've been banging on about it for decades now, and no one's doing anything because no one in power actually cares.
Concern and confusion about climate change from all over the world. And now the UN has turned to a very familiar figure to bring messages like these to the politicians gathering at the next critical climate talks.
On December the 3rd, governments will meet to address the defining issue of our time, climate change. This is our opportunity to have our voices heard.
At the opening of the Climate Convention, Sir David Attenborough will take up what's being called the People's Seat, from which he'll deliver a speech made up of questions and comments that the public want world leaders to hear.
There are farmers all around the world who will tell you about the changes taking place. There are fishermen all around the world that will tell you what the changes are taking place. There are people whose houses have been destroyed by increasingly extreme weather who will tell you what's taking place. And summarising it is an almost impossible job, but it's something that has to be done.
People will be able to contribute their opinions and experiences for the speech via social media using the hashtag #TakeYourSeat.
What is at stake is really extremely important and matters to every man, woman and child on this planet, let alone the natural world.
While this might remind leaders at the talks exactly what's at stake, any agreement or action will be in the hands of the politicians in the room.
And maybe the US President Donald Trump should put his 2 cents in. He has provoked renewed anger on the issue of climate change by tweeting today about an approaching cold front in the US. Brutal and extended cold blasts could shatter all records. Whatever happened to global warming, he tweeted. There is consumer hysteria in the US ahead of Thanksgiving, and it's all over a type of lettuce. The Centre for Disease Control and Prevention has warned consumers not to eat romaine lettuce, as it may be contaminated with E. coli. The BBC's Jonathan Savage has the details.
Salad, of course, is meant to be good for your health. Not this leaf, not right now. This particular E. coli outbreak has made at least 32 people sick in 11 American states, 13 of whom have needed hospital treatment. In Canada, 18 people have become unwell. The authorities are taking no chances. With Thanksgiving meals just a day away, millions could have romaine lettuce in their fridge. This advice comes from Laura Giraltovsky of the US Centers for Disease Control.
They had already gone to the store and they have romaine lettuce in their home, just to go ahead and throw it away and not to serve it. We really want people to know before we're about to eat a large dinner at a holiday, just not to buy it and serve something else.
In June, 5 people died and hundreds of others were infected across 35 US states after romaine lettuce spread the dangerous strain of E. coli. The illness can cause diarrhea, vomiting and, in the worst cases, kidney failure. Understandably, Laura Giraltovsky says the US Food and Drug Administration is trying to figure out where this contamination came from.
FDA is working on determining the source of the romaine lettuce, but at this time they haven't been able to identify a single grower or supplier or brand of romaine lettuce.
E. coli has a bad name, but it's worth remembering that the bacteria exists quite normally in our guts from the first hours of life. Only certain strains are at all dangerous. It's also been extremely useful in scientific research. E. coli was one of the first organisms to have its genetic code sequenced, helping us better understand our own DNA. As French scientist Jacques Monod is reported to have said, what is true for E. coli is true for the elephant.
Jonathan Savage reporting there, and California is now being investigated as the source of the contamination. Time for a bit of your feedback now. The story that we've been focusing on today about the warrant of fitnesses and the garage in Dargaville that has had its licence suspended, so it can't issue warrants of fitness anymore. This person says a car that fails its WOF must have been unsafe prior to going in for the WOF, which means a huge number of cars with current WOFs should not be on the road. Interesting point. This person says the man didn't die in a car accident. Believe it or not, people who die more than 7 days after a road crash don't go against the road toll, this person says. Point taken. However, we should remind people that a 62-year-old female has pleaded guilty to careless driving causing death in relation to this crash, in which William Ball subsequently died some 20 odd days after the crash, and that woman is going to be sentenced next month. And this one, I'm surprised no one has mentioned that WOF. A WOF only says that a car was roadworthy at the time of the inspection. It is the driver's job to maintain that state. You're right, and we did discuss that yesterday, actually. Also, this one. People go to dodgy WOF garages so they can get away with not having to fix things, this person says. Why haven't 2/3 had their cars rechecked? What do you think? Good point. Time for the news.
RNZ News at 6. I'm Paul Brennan. Good evening. The sister of a 65-year-old man killed when his seatbelt failed in a crash says she feels sorry for the owner of the garage responsible for signing off on the vehicle's warrant of fitness. Brenda Elliott has accepted an apology from the Transport Agency, which has admitted being too lenient in its monitoring of inspections by the Dargaville garage. In the wake of William Ball's death, Dargaville Diesel Specialists has had its licence suspended. Ms Elliott told Checkpoint it's tough being a business owner in a small town, and she expects the garage owner, Rodney Wilson, will go on paying for his mistake.
I do feel sympathy for Rodney, and sorry that he's going through this.
Brenda Elliott. Meanwhile, the police say a 62-year-old woman has admitted careless driving causing Mr Ball's death in January. She's due to be sentenced in the Dargaville District Court next month. A Flaxmere teenager says he did not stab a homeless man to death despite agreeing he was the only one among his friends who was holding a knife while they fought him. 14-year-old Hami Hanara, who is accused of fatally stabbing 40-year-old Kelly Donna during a fight over a torch, gave evidence in the High Court in Napier today. Cross-examined by Crown Prosecutor Steve Manning, he repeatedly denied killing Mr Donna.
You had the knife. Nobody else had a knife, did they?
No.
So do you think it seems pretty likely, Hami, that it's you that's used the knife to stab Kelly?
No.
Hami, you know you stabbed Kelly, don't you?
No.
Just don't want to face up to it?
No.
Hami Hanara also denied telling a witness that he had stabbed Mr Donna and that they should run immediately after the attack. Another business has pulled out of next year's Auckland Pride Parade in response to a ban on uniformed police taking part. Fletcher Building has announced it won't sponsor the festival or march in the parade as a company. Its Pride Committee says it doesn't agree with the direction of next year's festival. The committee says it values inclusivity and diversity and will reassess its involvement for Pride 2020. 8 banks, charities and business groups have pulled out of the parade in 4 days while still intending to be involved in the Wellington, Hamilton and Christchurch Pride festivals. A healthy food advocate is disappointed the Advertising Standards Authority has ruled that an ad marketing chocolate to children did not break any rules. The lobby group Healthy Auckland Together had formally complained about a Kinder Chocolate online video and TV commercial, arguing that the marketing of such food to children contravened the authority's standards. The group's spokesperson, Michael Hale, says the authority has ruled that the ad did contravene 2 criteria, but wasn't placed where a significant number could see it and wasn't shown in children's content on YouTube.
They're really trying to have it both ways. They're agreeing that it's attractive to children, they're agreeing that it's an occasional product, and then they're saying if you make token efforts to look like you're not putting it right in front of kids, that's fine.
Michael Hale says the authority is putting advertisers' interests before those of susceptible children. The Christchurch City Council has voted today in favour of a short-term solution for repairing damaged below-ground wellheads. It's aiming to make the city's water chlorine-free by May and says temporary repair work on 42 wellheads will help it achieve that aim. The repairs, costing up to $2 million, will only last 2 years but will allow the council to stop temporary chlorination at 16 pump stations. The heads will eventually need to be replaced with above-ground versions or abandoned. Māori Television's 4 current affairs programs, including its flagship news show Te Kaia, will be scrapped by March. The network announced today it's making its biggest changes in 14 years. Te Aniwa Hurehangenui reports.
Radical change. That's how Maori Television has described its decision to reduce its 4 current affairs programs to 1 next year. Its Deputy Chief Executive, Shane Todima, says the network wants to position itself as a modern digital media organisation. He says the change will be cost-effective, sustainable and enable more reporters to work out in the field. And he says existing staff will shift from their current jobs to newly created positions. Maori Television will still broadcast an evening news programme. Ko te aniwa, hurihanga nui aho.
The former National MP Jamie Lee Ross has made his first public appearance since receiving mental health care. Mr Ross this afternoon attended the opening of Middlemarch Hospital's new Te Aho Mai mental health facility, where he was briefly admitted last month. The Botany MP says he wanted to be there to show his gratitude to the staff and didn't want to talk politics. Mr Ross won't be returning to Parliament next week when the House resumes sitting, as he still has leave granted by the Speaker. It's 5 minutes past 6. On to sport now, and All Blacks coach Steve Hansen remains adamant that Kieran Reid is the right player to lead the side to next year's World Cup. In the wake of defeat by Ireland last weekend, there's been discussion as to whether Reid is still a first-choice number 8. Hansen has made 11 changes to the starting 15 for this weekend's final test of the year against Italy in Rome. Reid, Ardie Savea, Beauden Barrett and Damien McKenzie are the only survivors from the Dublin game. Having played 117 tests, the 33-year-old Reid doesn't appear to have the spring in his step he once did, but Hansen has no intention of making any change.
He's going well. He's in the best shape he's been all year. He's had some tough moments during the course of the year, which I think have been great for him. Come through that fine, and he's got all the respect in the world from the team, and his position's not under threat.
Steve Hansen. The New Zealand duo of Ryan Fox and Mark Brown are holding a top 10 spot after day 1 of the World Cup of Golf in Melbourne. They carded an opening round of 7 under par 65 to be in a 4-way tie for 9th. South Korea, Australia and England are joint leaders, 3 shots clear of New Zealand. And the Sydney to Hobart yacht race is to include an all-female professional crew for the first time in its long history. Skippered by race regular Stacey Jackson, the Wild Oats 10 crew of 13 will comprise 8 Australians and 5 internationals. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the BBC looks at journalism in Hong Kong, where there's a free press in theory. What about in practice? Alison Balance takes you to Fiordland's Murchison Mountains to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the rediscovery of the takahe. And this week's overseas correspondent Shobha Narayan discusses the Me Too movement in India. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, from afternoon news at 7 on RNZ National.
Weather now and the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow, Friday. Northland fine spells, isolated showers for the rest of today, scattered rain tomorrow, possibly heavy from evening. Auckland all the way to Manawatu, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country, showers today. Some heavy, possibly thundery about the ranges. Fine apart from early fog tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, showers today. Thunderstorms possible, especially about the ranges, and fine spells and isolated showers tomorrow. Hortowhenua to Wellington and for Wairarapa, rain, possible thunderstorms, especially about the ranges. Easing this evening, becoming mainly fine tomorrow. Cloud remaining in Wairarapa. Marlborough, occasional showers. Canterbury, patchy drizzle in the evening and morning. Afternoon fine spells and isolated inland showers. Nelson, Buller, Westland and Fiordland, also Otago and Southland becoming fine this afternoon. About now, however, isolated afternoon and evening showers about the ranges for the rest of today and for tomorrow. The Chathams, fine for the rest of today, cloudy day tomorrow, and there's the possibility of evening rain. It is 8 minutes past 6.
You're listening to Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Keep your feedback coming. You can text us on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. We're interested in your views on the story we've been running about warrants of fitness, or you can get in contact about anything else we've been discussing on the show today. Conserve water or you might run out. That's the message to the 744-strong population of the West Otago town of Tapanui. Heavy rain over the past 2 nights has turned the creek that feeds the town's reservoir to mud, meaning there's not enough water, clean water, available. The pinch point will come in the next couple of hours, you know, when people start coming home, turning on taps, having showers, making their dinner, you know the drill. As the usage increases, potentially it will drain the town's supply completely. Meanwhile, the township of Henley, just south of Dunedin, remains completely cut off by floodwaters. Jonathan Mitchell has been travelling around the district and he filed this report.
Clutha District Mayor Brian Cadogan, speaking from the Tapanui Reservoir earlier today, says it's sitting at just 20% of its normal level. The muddy water from the creek was being cleaned using filters, but he says these were clogging up so quickly that only a small amount of water was making its way into the reservoir.
The guys are doing their very best, as I say, to turn mud to water, and they are able to do that in a limited capacity. And they'll keep working away in the hope that we still get through, but we can't stress enough now that it is in the balance. If things go untoward, the creek stays as muddy as it is, and people use more water than they should, then there will be problems by tea time.
He's pleading with people in Tapanui to conserve water.
We had heard that this morning cars were getting washed, driveways were getting done, even the washing of the washing machine and the dishwasher.
The weather gods brought some relief to locals today as the rain cleared, making way for sunshine and high cloud. Although on the ground, the evidence of the last couple of days is stark. Dirty brown water surrounds hundreds of acres of land, meaning there's no way in and out for Headley locals. Those brave enough to try their luck today were local farmer James Adam. He had a big four-wheel drive that pushed its way through the high floodwaters. Speaking from the cordon, James Adams says locals have enough food and are in relatively good spirits, but it's not just humans affected.
We've got the other part of the farm down there too, and some pet lambs in the wool shed and things we've got to get down there to feed. They're on high ground in the wool shed. Yeah.
Met Service is forecasting more rain for the already sodden region, something Mr Adam isn't looking forward to.
Every second or third day we get another 30 mils, so that'll keep the river up. We've got to rely on the river. There's no pump, so we've got to rely on the river to drop, so it goes out naturally, yeah.
And so are you sort of prepared for a few days? There's more rain coming.
Yeah, I know. I've just given up looking at that part of it. Yeah. So, no, it's just what will be.
Fellow Henley resident Alan Innes says while several of his neighbours packed their bags and left on Tuesday, he decided to stay put.
When the water's starting to lap around your front doorstep, you know, like it's not a calming, relaxing sensation. It's actually quite a nerve-wracking sort of time, you know, because the high tide's sort of 3 and 4 in the morning, so getting up to see what the high tide was doing. But it's not generally the river that gives us the problem. It's the runoff from behind us coming down the hills.
He says there's been flooding on a regular basis since he moved there, including a major one last July.
It's the sort of thing we choose to live here, so it does happen. Most people have got alternative means of heating and cooking.
For those out on the roads, State Highway 8 through Lawrence is well and truly open after yesterday's deluge. And the drive from Dunedin seemed relatively smooth. There were contractors at certain points clearing slips and gravel that had fallen on the roads. The Clutha River is expected to slowly recede further, but that will be dependent on weather conditions, with more rain expected to fall in the coming days. From near Henley, for Checkpoint, called Jonathan Mitchell, Tēnā.
The Transport Agency has failed everyone over dodgy warrants of fitness exposed by a car crash in which a passenger later died. That's according to the chair of its own board. But there's no talk of the agency's chief executive standing down, despite the fact the industry says it's been raising the alarm for years about vehicle inspectors cutting corners. Phil Pennington reports.
The Transport Agency has admitted knowing since 2011 that Dargaville Diesel Specialists was not doing proper warrant checks. All the while, it failed to enforce the rules. In January, a car that the garage had issued a warrant for just a month earlier crashed and a seatbelt failed. The front seat passenger, 65-year-old William Ball, died in hospital. Now, the owners of nearly 2,000 vehicles given warrants by the Dargaville garage during the last year are having to get them rechecked. Michael Stiasny, who's been the chair of the Transport Agency since April, is grim.
This is a pretty horrific event, and as Fergus has said, NZTA has let everyone down.
He might think that Fergus Gammy, the Transport Agency's chief executive, has let everyone down, but Michael Stiasny isn't asking him to step down.
We're not discussing whether Fergus is accountable or not. What we are discussing is that we are having an independent review, and we will see what that review says. The responsibility and culpability of people in the organisation and outside the organisation is clearly open to debate.
The Dargaville case won't be the end of the revelations about the regulatory failings, Mr Stiasny says. Already 3 other areas of vehicle inspections have been shown to be compromised. The Motor Industry Association Chief Executive, David Crawford, recalls an exchange 2 years ago when he tried warning top transport agency officials about being too soft.
The reply I got was, well, if the system ain't broke, you don't need to fix it. And I said, by the time you find out that it's broken, verify that it's broken, it's too late. And that's the situation we're in now.
But instead of tightening up, he adds, they've witnessed technical experts like engineers being stripped out of the agency in multiple restructurings as recently as 2 years ago. David Crawford says he doesn't believe Fergus Gammy has prioritised safety till now.
Safety was something that just sort of occurred to the side, and at times we felt like we were talking to a brick wall.
Mr Crawford believes problems with warrants of fitness for cars are down to a few cowboys. But even if only 10% of garages are cowboys, that amounts to hundreds of thousands of inspections. The Transport Agency hasn't specified just what measures it's taken since it was alerted by the Dargaville case to gauge just how many garages aren't making it on the grade that they should be for WAFs. Fergus Gammy again.
We are acting very quickly on this to ensure that this cannot happen again.
Fergus Gammy avoided the question of whether he should resign by saying he's intent on fixing the long-standing regulatory weaknesses.
This was going on many years before I arrived, but we have actually now taken action to change it.
He's personally apologised to William Ball's family and said that there were other factors in the accident, such as the driver and the garage's own actions. David Crawford of the Motor Industry Association won't say he feels vindicated.
I don't like saying I told you so, but we just really want the New Zealand Transport Agency to get on top of this issue. It is critically important that consumers have confidence in the WAF system, and at the moment I don't think we have that confidence. The bill for the taxpayer of rebuilding that confidence in what is one of just 2 core functions of the Transport Agency, alongside road building, is already several $1 million, due to having to pay for truck recertifications in the South Island, a bevy of top lawyers, and now warrant of fitness rechecks for nearly 2,000 vehicles in the far north. For Checkpoint, Phil Pennington.
Meanwhile, the owner of the garage in question has shown Checkpoint photos of the seatbelt that failed during the Northland crash. The picture shows a broken plastic clip where the shoulder strap meets the lap belt at the point where the 2 chunks of the belt click together. NZTA says the car was unsafe and shouldn't have been given a WAF a month before the January crash. It's since suspended Dargaville diesel specialists' right to issue warrants and says the garage has had serious compliance problems since 2011. The Transport Agency admits it visited the Dargaville business more than a dozen times, but failed in its word to take decisive action or appropriately escalate issues. But the garage owner, Rodney Wilson, is adamant there was no problem with the belt when it was ticked off for a warrant.
Had it have been like that at the time of inspection, I'd never have passed it.
And did you personally do the inspection on that car?
The belt's got... Yes. The belt has got other little frays in it, and there's one where it looks like it's been jammed in the door, but they haven't let go. They haven't ripped or torn or anything. It's just the buckle that's caused the problem.
This is important. Yesterday you said to me that your garage had had no problems with NZTA. They have told us that they have been to your garage 15 times and there have been compliance issues since 2011. What's your response to that?
My response to that is I have paperwork here that will blow that into the weeds.
What do you mean by that?
Because in 2017, June 2017, we had a review and we came out 100% good.
Okay, I have seen the June review that you're talking about. Just talk people through that. So it says there whether you're compliant with documentation, compliant with machinery, and compliant with your attitude, in essence. So did you get ticked off in all of those areas?
Yes, everything was good. There's 1 or 2 things okay that needed looking at.
So what things do you accept required more attention from you?
Well, they told us that we needed more more time to do a warrant of fitness. That was one of the things, that the time allowed to do a warrant of fitness was unreasonable. We allowed half an hour, and in that half an hour, only 20 minutes about was for the inspection, maybe a little more, but you had the full half an hour because the office lady would get the particulars off the vehicle and load and issue the warrant of fitness at the end of the inspection. So they told us that was unreasonable. Now the AA say 25 minutes, and that's the whole job, including the paperwork.
So they told you that you weren't spending enough time inspecting the vehicles?
That is correct.
So in 2017, the NZTA says in December of 2017 that an inspector at your garage found that you weren't properly inspecting vehicles for warrant of fitnesses and that in fact you didn't check seat belts. They observed that staff were not inspecting seat belts during warrant of fitness checks. Is that true? Did that happen?
No. No. What happened is the man didn't check the centre rear seat belt on a double cab ute. That's the only thing that didn't happen. That was picked up in a review. Other than that, yes, seat belts were checked.
But there was a case then where you accept a seat belt was overlooked during a WAF check.
Yeah, but it was just the centre seat belt in the rear of a double cab ute.
Okay, so how can
but
you...
He says he did check it. Hang on. He says he did check it.
Okay, so the inspector said that a seatbelt was missed, but you challenged that and your worker challenges that?
Yes.
At the time, were you issued with a compliance notice?
A compliance notice, as improvement record required stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did they tell you that you had to do better?
And corrective action? Yes, and we did. We bent over backwards to improve the inspection process with 3 of us working together to make it more so that we didn't miss stuff, so we got it right.
So were there a couple of things, Rodney, that you think you went light on because they're older cars, because there's low incomes, people don't have a lot of money? Were you going a bit light on some things?
No, not really, not really. You'd look at one in a way that it's an older car, it's on a 6-month warrant. If something looked like it wasn't going to last 6 months, you'd fail it. If it was going to do another 6 months, it'd be fine.
Do you know William Ball, the man who died in the crash?
Yes.
Is there anything you would like to say to his family?
Well, I actually know them all. And yeah, I feel quite sad for them, for their loss, but at the same time I feel sad for me being accused of something that wasn't the cause of his death.
Is your conscience clear?
Yes.
Do you feel that you owe that family an apology?
Yes, I'd say sorry to the one I know, who's Harold. If my part had anything to do with his death, yes, I'm sorry. But if it didn't, well, I'm still sorry. I'm still sad for their loss, but yeah. I just would like to get to the bottom of this and find out just exactly what happened and why it happened.
And that was Rodney Wilson, who is the owner of the Dargaville diesel specialist that's had its warrant of fitness issuing licence revoked. We wanted to talk to the NZTA to ask them about this compliance review that Rodney Wilson says his garage passed with flying colours mid last year. We also wanted to confirm whether the inspector who reviewed the garage, Rodney's garage, is still working as an inspector. And also there's conflicting descriptions of the seatbelt failure. So we wanted to put all of those things to the NZTA, but they declined our invitation to appear on the show. In a statement, they say they stand by their decision to suspend the garage licence, and it was the police investigators who determined that the seatbelt was frayed and had failed in the crash. We've also had this piece of feedback from Greg while that interview was running. Greg wants to know if anyone has started a campaign to stop NZTA revoking Rodney's licence for issuing WAFs, thus wiping out start his whole livelihood, Greg says. I want to sign up. Let us know. We don't know actually the answer to that question. If anyone has started such a petition, we'd love to know. Moving overseas now, Saudi Arabia's foreign minister has said criticism of the Saudi leadership is a red line which will not be tolerated. Adel Al-Jubeir has strongly defended Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman against suggestions he was behind the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul last month. A CIA report is believed to have reached that conclusion. Here's the BBC's Luce Doucette.
An unshakable bond. But the US Congress now has the prince in its sights. It wants to know what role did he play in the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. But in Riyadh, the kingdom's top diplomat hits back.
The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia is not involved in this. We have made that very clear. We have an investigation that's ongoing, and we will punish the individuals who are responsible for this, and we will make sure it doesn't happen again.
So this is a red line. Is this a red line for the kingdom, sir, whatever the evidence is? And there may or may not be.
Show us the evidence. Show us the evidence. If Turkey has the evidence, please provide it. All we hear is leaks. Leaks. Show us the evidence. And then we talk. It's a red line when you have individuals calling for removal or replacement of our leaders. That's ridiculous, and that's unacceptable in Saudi Arabia.
There's another crisis too, Yemen, said to be on the brink of the worst famine in living memory. Saudi Arabia is under mounting pressure to end the bombing and blockades causing such suffering.
We are doing everything possible in order to minimize the humanitarian suffering of the Yemeni people. Now, when we have a militia that is radical, allied with Hezbollah and Iran, that launched more than 200 ballistic missiles at our towns and cities, are we supposed to sit there and say, oh, sorry, we're not going to do anything?
So if I understand you correctly, Saudi Arabia and its coalition are not ready to do anything to bring an end to their involvement in this war?
We have said that we support all the political efforts aimed at finding a resolution to the Yemeni crisis.
This week, the Saudi monarch set out his country's agenda for the next year. His son, the Crown Prince, in the front row. A signal to Saudis and the world that the kingdom sets its own course.
A young American missionary has been found attacked and killed with arrows by an endangered tribe in the isolated Andaman and Nicobar Islands in the Bay of Bengal. Before his fateful trip, 26-year-old John Allen Chu had made brief contact with the tribe before returning to a fishing boat. The Sentinelese community is largely an uncontacted people believed to have inhabited the islands for 55,000 years. The tribe is protected by the Indian government, but contact with them is illegal due to the risk of disease. Jeff King is from the organisation International Christian Concern and had a connection with the people Mr. Chow was working with. He told the BBC that Mr. Chow had a bad experience with the tribe and made a fateful decision to return.
This is something that had been in his heart for a while. It shows up in his journal. He had made several attempts, and on the day, if I understand the timeline, on the day he was killed, he had made an attempt. And the first attempt to get onto the island by kayak, the fisherman dropped him off. He goes by kayak, and he's driven back by arrows. Comes back, I think it was on the second visit, came back with a gift of 2 large fish, and he was able to sit with the men for a while, and they took the gift of the fish, but he said they were threatening. They were menacing, and they did shot him. He pulled the arrow out. Details are a little fuzzy. Got back to the boat, tragically decided to go back even another time, and that's where the fishermen were watching by binocular, and they saw him killed and taken apart. But it was intentional. It wasn't a lark. It wasn't a whim. And my understanding is he had even put a note into his journal for his parents saying that, he knew this was dangerous, and that if he was killed, they shouldn't look for his body, that he wanted to be buried there.
Jeff King from the International Christian Concern and Indian police have now arrested the fishermen who illegally ferried Mr Chow to the island. Time for a bit of your feedback before we go this evening. Again, you're all wanting to talk about the warrants of fitness saga that centres around this Dargaville garage who gave a warrant of fitness to a car that was involved in a crash that turned fatal, and that was only about a month after the warrant of fitness was issued. This person says, are people not accountable for looking after their cars between warrants? What evidence is there that the guy would have survived the crash despite the belt breakage anyway? As I said, the time between the warrant and the crash was about 4 weeks, and the NZTA has said that it was unacceptable that it had a warrant in the first place and that the vehicle was actually unsafe. This other one from Greg, who says Dargaville diesel is being hung out to dry by NZTA in order for NZTA to cover their asses and divert attention away from themselves. He is being made a scapegoat by NZTA. Not on, says Greg. NZTA has said it apologised to Mr Ball's family, that's the man who died in the crash. They've accepted his apology, but has also pointed out that they believe, Mr Ball's sister says that she believes there were failings in the way NZTA handled the situation. And this one is suggesting that people go to garages that they know are dodgy to get warrants because they're perfectly happy driving with substandard vehicles, the faults of which have been made perfectly clear to them. They just don't want to pay for the repairs. That is the feedback. Lots to say on that story that we've been running for the last couple of days. And that is Checkpoint for this evening. Thanks for joining us on your radio, your television, online, or however you chose to connect with us today. You can catch up on our stories tonight on rnz.co.nz/checkpoint.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30 now. The sister of the Dargaville man killed when his seatbelt failed in a crash feels sorry for the owner of the garage responsible for signing the vehicle's warrant of fitness. Hami Hanada has told the High Court in Napier he did not stab homeless man Kelly Donner to death despite agreeing he was the only one holding a knife. The Defence Force says SAS witnesses appearing before an inquiry into a Defence Force operation in Afghanistan must be allowed to remain anonymous. And Fletcher Building is the latest business to pull out of next year's Auckland Pride Parade. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather will be at 7.
You're back with Ken Oath, the voice of reason.
Yes, Ken Oath is back this week with reason, opinion and much more. But don't panic, as Ken says.